Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from what was then known as Czechoslovakia, Czech language English subs, released in the year 1969, directed by Juraj Herz, and this film is called The Cremator. So The Cremator is set in the 30s in Czechoslovakia when it was under the influence of Nazi Germany, and you've got the main character of Karl Koppenfringel, who is a cremator. So Karl is a very creepy man, but he seems harmless enough. He's got a young family, and he's always telling us about his role, a very important role, as the liberator of suffering. Basically, death brings true freedom, and he is always saying this, and it's turning into an obsession that's starting to turn him as a person. So he starts to talk more and more about death, give everybody an insight into what he does, but then outside influences, the Nazi ideology is starting to corrode his soul, and so he starts to turn even against his own family, and the family are worried that he's passing a point of no return, and if he passes that point, maybe they are in grave danger. So whether or not the family are actually onto something is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on The Cremator. This is definitely an unknown film as far as classic horror movies are concerned. Now, when it comes to Czech cinema, I am a massive fan of it, but I really haven't been exposed to a broad range. When I saw Jan Švankmayer's films, I've become a massive fan, and so I love Jan Švankmajer, one of my favourite directors, but I thought to myself, all right, well, what are other Czech films like? And so I really wanted to go into the older catalogue, basically the classic films, the movies that gave what was known then as Czechoslovakia the name that it has. And it's a name that's not very well recognised, but it is a name that is well known amongst its circle. And so I wanted to get inside that circle and see what Czechoslovakia could produce. And so when I actually went and did a little bit of investigating, I found a director named Juraj Herz. Now, Juraj Herz is considered a legend of Czechoslovakian cinema, and I really wanted to become familiar with his work. And when I actually started looking around, The Cremator was one that really stood out from everything else. And so obviously he's made other films, and I really need to check out his other films, but The Cremator was one that I really wanted to start with, because this is known as more of a horror film. And so when it comes, I'm a massive fan of horror, and I needed to check out classic horror films, and so classic horror and Czechoslovakia was definitely a recipe that was too good to refuse. And so not knowing really what to expect with this movie, I thought the trailer looked very fascinating, but I wasn't quite prepared for how phenomenal this movie would be. Now, this is an incredibly strange film. It's a very different way of filmmaking, but I thought it was a masterful way of filmmaking. This is a movie that does have horror elements, but it's a psychologically devastating experience, and it's an experience that wouldn't have been possible without the absolute masterful partnership between director and actor. Now, the main character of Karl Koppenfringel is played absolutely brilliantly by Rudolf Jaruzelski. Now, unfortunately, Juraj Herz and Rudolf Jaruzelski have since passed on, but they will be remembered for their partnership in The Cremator. This is a movie that every single line of dialogue will be studied, because it has a deeper meaning. And so everything that Karl Koppenfringel was saying not only gave you an insight into his mentality, but it was the mentality of society. And it wouldn't be as scary if it didn't actually happen. And unfortunately, it does happen. Even by today's standards, very vulnerable people can be corroded and can be actually made to turn against those that they love the most. And I think Karl Koppenfringel was that vessel. He was the vessel that was not only of a man who was creepy, but he seemed harmless enough, but when the outside, Nazi ideology started to come inside and infiltrate his mind, he started to become somebody else. And this happens in every day. And so Karl Koppenfringel, as I said, he's a vessel. He's not necessarily one human being. He is the whole of society. And this is how Nazi Germany got the stranglehold. And this is how Nazi Germany created so much devastation, is because it moulded people. It actually brainwash people to think things against what they'd initially think. And so when you actually idolise something to a certain extent, it becomes very, very dangerous. And I think that Karl Koppenfringel's progression from a loving family man who loves his job, and maybe loves his job a little bit too much, to a man that is just being led by outside influences, outside wolves, if you want to call it that, I just thought it was very, very scary. This is an incredibly scary film, but it's scary in a very subtle way. So I thought the black and white was a contributing factor to the nightmarish feel that this film has. You got an absolutely phenomenal soundtrack. Go out there and look on YouTube at the Cremator soundtrack. I thought it was incredibly unnerving but beautiful at the same time. And so whenever he uses this soundtrack, I thought it just magnifies that sheer level of discomfort that is around every corner of this movie. So you've got a shocking climax that actually gives you a reward. It's like a wick that has been lit, and it's slowly progressing to that stick of dynamite. You're bracing for the impact, and when Uriah Hertz gives you that impact, I thought it was incredibly rewarding. It was a reward for sticking it out, for that slow progression from being the wick being lit to the explosion that is Karl Koppenfringel. So that was absolutely phenomenal. I thought that, as I said, the script has just so much more of a double meaning that just gives the movie that much more power, and it's something that I thought you can look at in different layers. And so I just thought, as far as classic horror films are concerned, this is phenomenal. As I said, it's very strange the way that the actors will actually look at the screen and give their lines of dialogue. It's not something that I've been familiar with, but it was something that just created that unnerving quality. Is if you give something a little bit different, you feel as though you're outside your comfort zone. You feel as though you're outside conventional storytelling, and that's why Uriah Hertz, it was the director that he was. And I believe that he deserves his legendary status, and unfortunately not enough people know about the Cremator. And so if you are a fan of horror films and classic horror films, the Cremator is essential viewing. It's not a movie that hits you with gore, but it is a movie that's very shocking. It's because, as I said, it's that anticipation. It's that runaway train where the brakes have broken and you just know that something really bad is going to happen, but because you don't know exactly what Uriah Hertz is prepared to, you don't know exactly where this director is going to take you. You know that the impact is coming, but because you don't know exactly where it's going to come from, gives it that certain sense of anticipation, therefore the excitement. And so, as I said, incredibly unnerving film, incredible filmmaking, incredible acting performances, incredible script. If I have a little bit of a problem, there was times where it got a little bit repetitive, it got a little bit too preachy, but pushing that aside, this movie is just absolutely intriguing. It's phenomenally made, and I believe that it does stand the test of time. It is essential viewing for all horror fans. So if it sounds like your kind of thing, definitely go out there and see The Cremator. I'm going to give this one 4.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.